We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
Welcome into Tailgate. Austin Gayle here with Mike Renner. Day what? What day is it here?
Friday.
Friday at the Combine. Today on the show we have Brady Quinn, second, third best quarterback we've had on the show today. We actually had Nate Tice on as well, and then Cynthia Frelund from NFL Network also joins the show, a three-piece meal following yesterday. We're excited for today's show, but also going to highlight, I got one mission tonight, Mike. I'm getting an Uncrustable from Prime. So there is that bar that I mentioned on the previous show that stays open until
it's a steakhouse.
It's a steakhouse. It stays open until like 6 a.m. They like literally sell beer till 6 a.m. And they say when everyone's leaving, they give everyone an Uncrustable. Yeah. And I feel like I need to verify that.
Still haven't gotten one.
I'm getting one, so I'm getting one tonight.
Hopefully, I pray for you.
You took the night off. You better be getting one too.
I did take the night off. It was a business decision. I had to do a little work. Did a little work. Got 9 hours of sleep. Now I actually feel fantastic. So here we are.
So tonight we're going to go out with reckless abandon. Without further ado, let's get to the interviews. Brady Quinn, Nate Tice, and Cynthia. Now doing the show is friend of the podcast, man. Last time I think we had you in person was here in Indianapolis before COVID struck, but back to have you here, Brady Quinn. Excited to talk hand size. We're talking a little bit before. How much does that matter? Let's talk about how much it matters right now.
I mean, what you guys do, all the data and analytics, what does it tell you guys? So, I thought Kenny Pickett threw the ball right there.
He did. So my thing too, though, is like everyone's saying, oh, you know, he's got small hands, but he is going to play in the NFL with 2 gloves, right? Like, why not measure his hand size with the gloves on? I think the gloves, like, he is overcoming a lot of that box being not ticked with the gloves.
Well, I don't know if it's that so much, right? The gloves provide an enhanced grip for the surface area, right? That he can grab with an 8.5-inch hand. That's what it's about, right? If you got a bigger hand, you can put more of your hand on that ball, which equates to supposedly greater ball security. But the reality is, if you have a glove on, all right, or 2 gloves on with an 8.5-inch hand, it's probably better than a 10.25 hand without gloves.
No, for sure.
It's just it's naturally those gloves are incredible. The grip that they provide. So. I don't think it's a big deal at all. You know, guys naturally have to adjust their grip because the NFL ball is fatter, it's longer, and you're gonna have to find that sweet spot for how you spin it best. There's like a learning curve there, and then once you get with that, it's just, you know, the rest is is all history. So
if you're a cold weather team though, and obviously like Buffalo is like always the one that gets brought up, but like if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are gonna have to play games in bad weather, and obviously in a division where you're all outside in that division, would you draft a guy like him? With that being a thing that could be possibly an issue for you in those conditions.
If only we had a sample size of him playing at Heinz Field during his college days.
But he did when it was bad weather. When he did play in the rain, he did not play well. He played good weather this past year, but
well, first off, there's always going to be a drop off usually for quarterbacks playing inclement weather.
That's fair.
I know he didn't throw well at the Senior Bowl, but you're kind of up against it too. You know, working with a new system, guys you haven't thrown to before.
Yeah.
And so you're not always going to have the most consistent days. But again, you know, throwing indoors, I mean, the majority of your games aren't going to be played in bad weather. So like I said, I'm not too overly concerned by it. I think we make a big deal about it because we're looking for reasons to knock him down a peg as the quarterback one in this class, or make Malik Willis look better, whoever else you want to. I mean, there's agendas to all this thing. So.
We were talking a little bit before, and you were saying, you know, you don't make too much of, 40 times and arm length and all that stuff, but more pay attention to the tape. What can you actually gain from this process, right? Everyone in media creates these winners and losers, risers and fallers, but who is legitimately rising out of this, and how are they doing it?
Well, the biggest thing is medical.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, they're right now creating, their comp, their grade, and they're going to look at the medical, and there's going to be some guys that some teams don't even want to touch. So that's going to be part of it, the interview process, the mental, emotional evaluation. There's going to be some players, too, that they don't even want to touch because of past transgressions and the way they've handled that. So that's also going to be a part of it that I think is personally most important. I mean, you can learn a lot about these guys.
Yeah.
And if a guy is like a shithead in a 15-minute meeting, it's going to tell you a lot about how he's going to handle, those longer meetings when you have him come visit you or you go out there to visit him. But I think those are the two most important things. The 40 time and all that stuff kind of, I guess, can come into play if you're between two guys and you want some sort of justification or you want to match what you see on film, right? Like we all have our intuition or we all have a feel for what we see on film, and then we're looking for the data analytics to back it up. I mean, this is part of that data analytics.
To me, there's also like, if a guy comes in unprepared, like Ja'Kai Polites of the world,
Sure.
it only like it sifts those guys out. It's like everyone has to do this. Everyone has
If
to
you
prepare
fail a
to do
drug
this.
test, what
Exactly.
like, you're looking at him like you're a moron. Like you're an absolute moron.
Yeah, it's not so much that you even did the drugs. It's like, how do you even show up and make that mistake, right? It's more of along the lines of like, you need to know coming in that this is going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, now look, I have issues with this process. I hate the fact that they try to make them bench and then test on the same day.
Yeah.
People will say, well, they do that at their pro day. Well, not really, because not many people, no quarterbacks anymore do the bench test, but then not many guys actually will go out and test again. Usually they do it once, that's it. And the other thing is they'll test on the bench and then they'll go right into the workouts and all that. There's not like an 8-hour lull between a bench press and then going out there and testing and doing the field drills and all that. So the whole setup here, I think, could be, I guess, more conducive to these guys, being able to perform at their best. But hey, maybe that's why we have a fast 40 time now.
Yeah, I mean, you did see a bunch of people opt out of, like, it used to be probably, I don't know, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It was rare to not see a guy do a full run of testing. Like, guys would go everything, and now it's like guys do maybe a drill, 2 drills, and that's it.
Yeah, so a lot of the sports performance guys that I've talked to have basically said, look, again, pushing everything to prime time, it's not in their best interest for testing. If you naturally look at like training, right, and when is your testosterone levels the highest, it's usually, let's say to train in the morning, train like early afternoon, that's typically when on average most male testosterone levels are highest. So if you really want to have peak performance, those are the time frames you want to work within. And so it's really not to their benefit. But what time frame do you usually have a pro day at? It's sure as hell in prime time.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason and design behind it. That's part of the information they're getting from some of these, strength coaches and some of the guys, at least that I've talked to in South Florida. So there's a little bit of that to it. And I think just for some of these guys, especially the guys that played in the semifinal, the season keeps getting pushed back. You're really becoming a track athlete. And, they would need as much time as possible to get down that start, that first 10 yards. It's so important what the 40 is going to look like.
Yeah.
You mentioned the NFL interviews and those being like such a big part of this process, like ruling guys out for character concerns. We were talking to Dane Brugler of The Athletic. He's like, more teams take players off their board for the character stuff and for the interviews than they do even anything else here in Indianapolis. I'm not sure how much you've seen some of his media and some of his interview process or if he was at the podium today, but Kayvon Thibodeau has been knocked on this process by a handful of people saying, he's got this ego, he's got this confidence and all that stuff. I came away from the podium today feeling like really good about his confidence. Yeah, he's a guy that really believes in himself, but I just feel like a lot of that stuff has been overblown. Have you had chances to talk to him, and what have your impressions been?
In the past, and I've obviously listened to some of the things he's said. Look, he's a talented player. I think he's got upside, but there's just something about him in watching the tape there, he kind of disappears. And he does that in a league that really isn't necessarily known for great tackles in the Pac-12. So I kind of look at him and go, maybe there's something there. And then you talk to a kid like Jermaine Johnson, who is like just well-spoken, has a certain presence about him. He showed out this year, whether it was the first week against Notre Dame throughout the season, at the Senior Bowl. I mean, every step of the way, I think he's going to test well too. But he just comes off with a different demeanor. He talks about, serving and just wanting to be the best teammate and all that. And look, I get it. Everything's canned now.
Yeah.
Like, these kids are prepared like, well, I'd say Biden, but he just reads off the prompter, so I'm not even sure how prepared he is anymore. But I would say like basically a politician. I mean, they are prepped and prepared where even like we had Boye Mafe on, and I was just asking, I was like, hey, who are some of the better tackles you went up against this year? Oh, they're all good. But I'm like, dude, come on.
Yeah, no, dude.
like you've got to have one that you said, this is going to be a challenge, bring your lunch pail. And you try to have to drag this stuff out of these kids nowadays. It's like no one's allowed to show any personality.
Something we've brought up a ton in this interview, talking about the interview process is just like looking for genuine, right? Looking for authenticity. And you talk to guys like, oh man, who's some of the toughest guys you face? Like, oh, they're all nameless faces. Everyone's a good player. It's like, dude, when are we going to get something real? And I think you do see that from some of the guys in this process. Dameon Pierce, the running back from Florida, who's like screaming at the guy who's trying to pull up the ball. Like, you see some of that genuine authenticity. And I do think teams ultimately flock to those guys more than they do, other guys.
All right, let's talk about this quarterback class. You obviously, Notre Dame, great, NFL quarterback. Which quarterback reminds you the most of yourself?
I don't know. I'm not. I hate.
They're going to have big hands, that's for sure.
Well.
Yeah.
I hate doing this. I won't go into that.
Okay. This quarterback class. Who are you drafting first, and where are you drafting him?
Well, I think Kenny Pickett has the best film, and that was usually where I kind of lean towards watching his tape, how his game's going to translate to the NFL level. So I'm leaning there. I think Malik Willis probably has the highest upside.
Yep.
And to me, Sam Howell is the guy that I think has just been the forgotten man in all of this. And honestly, I'd probably rank them in that order.
Okay.
Desmond Ritter's the one that I just, ever since they beat Notre Dame, I don't want to, but damn it, he just keeps checking every box.
Yeah.
Let's say I don't want to, but at the same time, you watch him, then he's continually kind of developed from even just watching him throw. He looks comfortable under center. It's not something that necessarily did a ton. I think there was times where he was inconsistent with his accuracy. He doesn't necessarily have the strongest arm, but I think even watching him in comparison to everyone else, which is nice to see at the combine, it's not. I mean, Carson Strong's supposed to be one of the strongest arms, and he could look like he was babying it, having a hard time with accuracy.
Yeah.
And so, in comparison to that, I was like, man, Desmond Ridder came away to me kind of turning some heads. And when you run a 40 at the time he did, he can be a legitimate run threat. Like, we would talk about that. If you're somewhere in the 4 or 5 guys as a quarterback, when it's a zone read, you can actually read it. You know, when I was back there, like in Seattle, for example, I would just hand the football off and then carry out my fake and make it look like it was, because I was never going to beat a DN because he could retrace and catch me.
We were talking a little bit before about the receiver class, specifically Drake London. Brandon Marshall is your comp, and you said throwing to Brandon Marshall, it's like throwing to a shack over the middle of the field. He's got such a big catch radius. Speak to Drake London and the type of player he is, and then also some of your other favorite receivers in this class.
Yeah, so there's obviously a lot of excitement, I think, around Drake London and Treylon Burks because of their size and the athleticism that they match with that, which is great, right? I mean, there's one thing that when a player loses his ability to separate when he gets older, as long as he's got the ability to use his wingspan and his body and that catch radius, that's something you love as a quarterback. Because look, these DBs, we haven't seen them run yet. I know this much. So Tyquan Thornton, has the fastest 40 so far, and he was training down at a place called XPE. There's 3 other guys that trainer told me, all DBs. Nick Cross out of Maryland, Boogie Barnes out of Baylor, and then Treek Woolen out of UTSA. They're all training there too. And he's like, yeah, even if he had the 4.21, he goes, one of those 3 might beat him from how their testing is.
Wow.
So, it's one of those things where as fast as you can be as a wide receiver, the DBs on average are usually faster, and so you're going to
have to be.
Right. They have to be, and so the size, the ability to high point the football, make a contested catch, all those things make you that much more, I think, valued to a quarterback. And that's why I think Drake London has the potential to be the first taken. I mean, he showcases the ability, whether it's downfield, getting yards after the catch, being physical. He's run a variety of routes, too, even though that system was kind of simplified under Graham Harrell. I think at the next level, he's going to be effective. Very similar to how Mike Evans is, even though he's not as big. And then Treylon Burks the same way. I think he's just a good football player. I mean, I know he's not as explosive as Cordero Patterson, but he's the type of guy that I think you could line up in a bunch of different positions and he'd be effective.
I like that Cordero Patterson comp because I think Cordero Patterson
But what do you
was
want
similarly.
He was like a 4.4 guy, right?
Yeah, he
4.5.
was a little.
Oh no, Cordero Patterson.
Cordero Patterson was like mid 4.4s. But it's interesting,
It's not that far off,
usage-wise comp, because I just think you want the ball in those guys' hands as quick as possible, and that's what we saw.
And
at
he's
Arkansas.
bigger. Like he's going to be a
and
bitch to try to bring down if he gets to the second level. So whether it's quick screens, fly sweeps, even put him in the backfield every once in a while. It's not like we haven't seen teams do that.
I mean, that's exactly how they used him in Arkansas, right? They're trying to get him the ball right behind the line of scrimmage, and everyone's like, why isn't he this vertical receiver? Some people making comparisons to DK Metcalf. I was talking to his agent, and he's saying, well, quarterback there wasn't that good. Working the vertical route trees, all that great.
Love the kid, but I mean,
they're trying to get him the ball as soon as he can.
He can't separate the same way either, at least from what I saw. I felt like, it just wasn't quite the same. But I also felt like with Pierce at Cincinnati, when he ran his 40, it's like, what?
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing him separate like that either.
Yeah.
So that was probably one of the bigger surprises to me.
All right, let's switch gears.
Kind of like a Troy Apke surprise for Deion.
right.
That really caught Deion off guard.
It really did.
All right, Notre Dame football. Marcus Freeman, you were the one who introduced him here at Notre Dame. What are your first impressions of him as head coach, and what is Notre Dame going to be getting?
I think, one, he's got young, he's energetic, but the biggest thing nowadays, and especially with the transfer portal, because of the access that every player has to it, it's the relationships that he's been able to develop with the kids. It's a day and age where you've actually got to develop that. You can't just be that head coach who's a figurehead, comes in, talks to the team every once in a while, and then barely knows that freshman that we just recruited's name. You've got to know these kids. You got to know what makes them tick, how to push their buttons. All those things, I think, are reasons why in a year's time he was able to develop that sort of, if you want to call it chemistry, just relationship with the team. I think it was important to why he's there now. In regards to, what will make him a great head coach, the hard thing is, and I don't care if you had 20 years of head coaching experience and you're getting the job, or you've never had any head coaching experience, being the head coach at Notre Dame is like being a CEO. You've got to be able to manage in a macro sense your staff and delegate, and then be able to handle all the other things you've got to handle in regards to fundraising and speaking with boards and donors and everything else that like makes it go and helps you compete, because your ability to compete on the field is also coupled with your ability to build the best sports and performance center, which there's little talks that I might start, building up here, and endowing position groups for the coaching staff and all those things, right? So that, we'll see through time, but I'm optimistic because I think he's got great perspective from having played and kind of seeing it from the player's perspective there. He understands the importance of recruiting. He understands the importance of what steps they need to take in order to be competitive. And he's putting together a staff that I personally love. Like, I know James Laurinaitis. I know Chancey Stuckey, play with Chancey. All those guys. I hear he stands damn best in the business. So we're lucky to have him. You get Tommy Reese back as part of this whole deal. Al Golden, I'm curious to see what the defense will look like. But, look, obviously he's coming from a team that made it to the Super Bowl this year. So
yeah, I have a take on it. Tell me if you agree or not. That I think Brian Kelly, sure thing, and you knew what you were getting with him. Like you said, very much CEO type. But with Marcus Freeman, I think the spread of where they can go is higher. Like, I think he can recruit at a higher level. I think he can bring in talent differently than what Brian Kelly could. But at the same time, you don't know the unknown in terms of the management, where I think you give them the higher ceiling with a guy like Marcus Freeman than maybe you have with Brian Kelly.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I don't think Marcus is going to be disingenuous. He's not going to go down someplace and try to have a Southern accent or dance, shake his booty.
I need your take on that. What? Come on, what happened there? What was that?
I honestly, the Southern accent thing, I was like, all right, maybe he's had a few drinks. And then it kept going. I was like, oh, this is like watching one of these kids.
My family.
It's like watching.
My family.
It's like Sam getting on one of those scooters and getting hit by a car right outside of him. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe we just did that.
Yeah.
That was kind of how it felt watching it, listening to it. And then you go to the dancing thing, and I felt bad for the kid.
Yes.
I really did, because
Yes.
I'm like, man, that's gonna go viral and be there forever. And you got this old guy like shaking his booty on you. Yeah, it's just.
I just don't. Yeah, I didn't
doesn't
see the
really give you
obvious wins.
street
And some
cred.
people have spun it to where like he knows it's going to go viral. So like, the LSU's going to get more.
The kid went. Where do you? Alabama.
No, then he decommits and the whole thing.
Yeah, you got to go to Georgia or Bama.
I can't imagine he's doing that many more dancing videos with recruits.
No, but they also, they've got a lot of things going. You got a group licensing, deal for them to be able to sell their name, image, and likeness for their jerseys. That's huge. There's not many schools that have locked that in.
That's massive.
It's
every
massive.
school will get there, but yeah,
they'll eventually get there. They were a first mover in that sense. So he's set up a lot of things. I think that'll help him be successful. And the reality is this: if I said to you, Les Miles and Ed Orgeron won national championships.
Yeah.
I think Brian Kelly's a better coach.
Yeah,
exactly.
Sure, yeah.
No,
So
you're right.
if you can recruit the state, you can recruit that region, they should be fine and have the ability with the resources they have to compete in the SEC and win a national championship, because he's just a better coach.
With or without the fake accents and the dancing, they should be able to get there. It's pretty much where they're at. I want to throw it's kind of a range of questions at you, but it's an opportunity to talk a little bit about this past year's rookie quarterback class, and talking specifically about Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson. Talking to a lot of other quarterbacks that have played in the NFL, Jordan Palmer, one of them, JT O'Sullivan. They talk so much about situation and situation mattering.
Circumstance.
It's literally everything, right? And I think you look at Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson maybe not meeting the expectations that they had going in. Speak to the situations they're in and where their areas of their game need to improve, but also how much the situation needs to get better.
I mean, it's hard with Trevor because it was a circus there.
Yeah.
And
Speaking of really good videos, viral videos.
yeah, there may be still some out there. So I'll hang on to your seat there. Maybe something waiting to come out. I don't know. You're hearing a lot of things here at the Combine, so it's tough. I mean, I don't know. I would almost just wipe the slate clean. You're starting over with Trevor. I think there's some seasoning there. He showed toughness. Their offensive line, for starters, needs to improve. That's the first thing. The second thing is he has got no one to throw to. Guys can't separate. The system was lacking too. I think Brian Schottenheimer and Darrell Bevel obviously have to take accountability for that, but Urban Meyer does too. I mean, at one point they were benching James Robinson in the game, right? Because of a fumble, and he's your best offensive player, and you take him off the field.
Yeah.
If you're the opposite team, you're like, all right, we have to worry about Carlos Hyde? Not really. So like what was going to stack the box and stop whoever they get the football to so you can complete a pass. And the receivers can, really separate. Not that that's like Laviska Shenault's deal, but still, like they can only do so much. So they just have so much work to do on their roster. That's the first thing. I mean, they've got some pieces, but they're just such a long way away. And I don't know. I feel for him, honestly, because I don't know what direction this thing's going to go. Because one of the things that kind of surprises you when you struggle like that and you have this, I mean, again, everyone's calling it a circus. That's probably the most appropriate word, is your ownership seems to be like absentee ownership, right? Tony's not there anymore. He's more focused on the soccer team. Or was he?
Wrestling.
Like, wrestling.
AEW.
Yeah, wrestling. It was soccer, now it's wrestling. And it's just hard. I mean, you see teams that struggle to have that sort of stability or for things not to get out of hand. Stephen Ross gets the same rep in South Florida for how he handles things with the Dolphins. And now we're kind of looking at them being in a completely different crap show. So, yeah, Trevor, it's just – I mean, there's times when he you could tell he was forcing the football. He was inaccurate, didn't really know where to go with the football, and it felt like he was spinning. Zach Wilson, I wasn't high on in the first place. I think all the things that I was concerned by kind of came to light. His smaller stature, the chance that he'd get hurt, the ability to have to get him outside the pocket or deeper drops, something to help him see a little bit better and see the field better, be able to be more than just the one, maybe getting to a second read progression type guy. I mean, obviously he struggled seeing the field. I mean, it was a big jump from what he faced in his final year at BYU to what he's going to be asked to do at the NFL level. So I'm not giving up on him. I just think, that's another team that could still build on the roster, but also they have to do unique things to help him. It's not like Trevor Lawrence, where I don't think you have to do quite as much. You just have to give him a little bit more to work with.
So you're the Jags, you're the Jets. Who are you taking in this class? First overall, fourth overall, 10th overall? Are you giving them help, or are you saying?
Well, on the offensive line, I think you need to.
Okay.
So whether it's Aquanu or Evan Neal, I don't know. There's a wide receiver that anyone looks at like Jamar Chase this year. I don't know if you guys do, but I don't see it that way. I think there's a ton of value. I mean, the kid out of North Dakota State.
Yeah, wow.
I mean, holy cow.
Yeah.
That's insane.
I mean, he looked good in the Senior Bowl, but then you watch that and you're like, damn, I don't know he's that fast.
Yeah, that's like what Jamar Chase tested like.
Was Christian Watkins his name?
Christian Watson.
Watson.
Yeah.
Watson. But like, there's guys like everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to make a bunch out of it, just a fast 40 time, but I mean, this is the fastest wide receiver class we had in 40 times, right?
Yeah. But they're also a lot small guys. Like Wilson,
smaller,
183.
but this is like your stat. You guys love separation. It doesn't matter quite as much.
Yeah, that's why it's trending smaller. So
right. And who's the last like big body wide receiver to ultimately dominate? I mean, Julio, would you count him in that category? Was he 6'2"?
He was 220.
What's that?
He was 220 coming out, so yeah.
Right.
Probably.
So, I mean, I'm saying you start to look at that. It's trending more towards that. More spread, more separation, guys who can get in and out of routes and cuts.
We could probably close with this one. It was kind of a follow-up to the situation question, but I find myself like talking about like Malik Willis, right? A guy that has this high upside. Situation, in my opinion, is going to matter so much to him. And you're seeing people talk about this idea that Carolina could take him as high as 6. Only one pick in the top 100. A lot of dysfunction in the coach. They already fired Joe Brady. I don't love their receiving. I mean, there's a lot of reason to believe that situation, as good as you think Malik Willis could be, is never going to meet expectation unless like there could be a coaching change if Matt Rule doesn't live up to expectations. So I do think that. What's your opinion of the fit Malik Willis to Carolina? And then what is the better fit for him? Where should he go? Where should he end up?
It's a tough question to answer. I think it could work in Carolina, and they'd have to keep Christian because his ability to run, and I know he didn't run his 40, but I think from watching tape, he strikes me as the type to be like a 4.60 or sub guy, kind of like the E.J. Perry kid from Brown. I think he's at least that fast, if not maybe faster. I don't know that he's as fast as Renner, but that being said, I think he's a legitimate threat to run, which helps out McCaffrey and helps out an offensive line that still could use a little work. They do need more weapons if they're going to go that route and take them. But my biggest concern for him is, again, similar like inconsistent accuracy, but also just the jump in offense, a little more RPO heavy. I don't see a sense of timing and rhythm within the offense that you have to play with in the NFL, in part just because of the way the pocket collapses. I mean, you just don't have as much time, so all your throws are anticipatory throws, and you've got to read defense. So many of these kids aren't really taught to read defense. I mean, think about RPO. It's a run play, you're reading one defender. If that defender, whatever he does, you're putting that run-pass conflict. If it goes one way, you're throwing it. If not, you're handing off. That's pretty damn simple for a quarterback post now.
I can do that.
Exactly. I mean, you can teach most people to do that. My eldest daughter.
It's not a big deal, man. We know.
So the truth of the matter is, when you start talking about progressions and then middle field close reads, cover specific reads, it becomes a lot more complicated than how you go about, reading the rotation of safeties and how defenses will toy with you and play with you. Different ways teams are playing empty now, with they're kind of giving you some false indicators. For example, you have a running back that's displaced all the way on the outside. You get a linebacker on him, you think it's man-to-man. Teams nowadays will put that guy man-to-man and almost like a box and one, and they'll just play cover 4 with the rest.
Nice.
And so they kind of start to disguise some of those principles. Now, they might end up playing a 4 match, which basically plays out as man. But there's just different things that they're doing to kind of toy with offenses. And he's got to learn all those things. So that, to me, would be like one of my biggest concerns for him is whether or not how he handles that, what's around him, because there's not much around him. And I was able to overcome all that. But like the best situation, obviously, is, you find yourself in somewhere like Pittsburgh, where you go to a team that they've got some talent, some guys to throw to. The offensive line isn't great, but you figure they build on that. And then there's a defense that's not going to force you to be in a shootout, right? So I think that's sort of scenario. You got Najee Harris in the backfield; he can help take some of that load off you. That would be a better scenario if you ended up someplace like that. But again, we could talk hypotheticals all day.
Brady, really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on, man.
Anytime, guys. I got to get the barber cut thing going on.
Whoa, I'm taking a graduate course at Notre Dame.
That's
I'm
right.
a fellow Golden Domer now.
Yeah.
I'm going to say I'm a Golden Domer. Didn't get to do bookstore basketball, but when I come out of it, I'll
Are
get
you
a barber
allowed
shop.
to take only one course?
Yeah, they
so.
called me, and it was kind of a weird process. They're like, so what are you actually trying to do? Just trying to take one course to literally have this joke on the podcast. It's like going to be like $800.
You told that to admissions?
Yes. And then they let me do one course. That just shows you how freaking piece of shit Notre Dame is. I was
just gonna say,
Golden Domers was this big high thing.
Notre Dame struggling that much?
I literally
Dude.
emailed them like, this is what I'm trying to do. Like, yeah, that sounds good.
They let a barber in.
And
It's like, let him in.
I think you're being scammed. I think you went to Notre Dame Academy.
well, sorry, I'm getting a really nice degree. No, but thanks again, Brady. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, it's great being here.
I'm done.
Now joining the show is probably a better quarterback. We had a good quarterback coming on. Now we have a great one. It's Nate Tice, former Wisconsin Badger legend. Really great to have you on the show, man.
Just a legend in my own mind.
Dude, we had Brady on just now, and everyone who's listening to the show just listened to this interview. When you were like Brady Quinn, an obvious Notre Dame legend, I was like,
What do you want me to do?
No,
Right?
you don't have to call him a legend like that. It's weird calling another dude a legend.
Okay. Well, I mean, maybe it was. Maybe it's not.
It was weird. It was weird.
Like
Well,
I said,
anyway, we have a
it's like a
legend.
fistball game.
We have a
That's
legend on the
legend.
show now, Nate. Let's start with the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Kenny Pickett hand size. I know you've probably talked about it 1,000 times.
Many times.
Again.
Brady before was like, I was like, how big are your hands? He's like, take a guess. It's like, how big you think they are? I was like, dude, what the fuck is going on here?
How big are you?
Brady is like legitimately one of my
I think it was
favorite
9
people in
1/4.
media.
9 1/4.
9 1/4, I think I was.
It's
Yeah.
not bad. It's
And then
not
I had 34.5-inch arms, which was worthless as a quarterback.
Okay.
It's like, yeah, no, it's like.
Do they even measure their arms anymore? I feel like not a lot of guys get that
I think
measured.
some don't.
Okay,
like,
yeah.
I think, or it's more one of those where like, you can see what everyone emphasizes when they list everybody's stuff. Like,
Yeah.
what Kenny Pickett, it was like height, weight, hand size, nothing else. Like, that's what it is. So
Mike and I were on the Sirius show today, and I was telling him that last night I was talking to a lot of people about the palm percentage and why that matters.
Yes.
And you look at Nate Tice's hands. Nate Tice
Yes.
has a kind of a small palm, but he's kind of got
long
some
fingers.
long ass
I-
fingers. I
I've
think
been told,
that matters.
I've been told that I should have played piano,
Yeah.
but yep, I have
Should have
no
played
music.
quarterback.
I know, right? I said the same thing. I just got to hang out and signal. It wasn't that's why I got a scholarship, right? Just I could signal really well. Gone right.
So Brady was pretty adamant with the Kenny Pickett hand size stuff that it doesn't matter. Like you saw it on tape at Pittsburgh, and he's going to have the 2 gloves. He was even saying like, you wear gloves with the grip that you get with that. It's almost better than even having like 10 1/4-inch hands. He was comparing to like the gloves like help you that much grip the ball. That it's all being kind of overblown. Are you in the same boat there? I do think. I mean, the amount of times I've talked about it, it's got to be overblown, but
Yeah.
I do think it's a fun topic to kind of keep you here saying
I
people
know.
talk about it.
Well, it was one of those things. I grew up around Dante Culpepper, and he always had fumble issues, and everyone's like, "Oh, he's so big and he has tiny hands," and he had like 9 1/4. So it's like, and then you see guys like Burrow, 9-inch hands, and so. Can you play or can't you play? Like, and it's like if he was getting it every single time someone touched him and that ball was flinging out, like
Yeah.
it's okay. Then I'd have some worries. But he already wears the gloves. He's already like has the issue kind of like solved.
That's how I feel about it,
yeah,
yeah.
So it's
And
like
also, there's like Daniel Jones has the worst fumbling problem ever, and they're still trying to talk themselves into him.
Yes.
As like being a franchise quarterback. So
Yes.
it's like, is it going to be that bad?
And really,
Why
it's
not?
more just like pocket awareness and like how you handle the ball because
Yeah.
that's so much. Some guys pat, some guys are really good and having structure. You think of the Peyton like doing all this,
Yeah.
and some guys are just loose with it. So really, that's what matters more. So I'm not too worried about it. It's more just what you think with these guys.
So
Just
you,
watch
you
them.
put any stock then in anything that happens here for a quarterback.
I would say just a little, like,
Okay.
but I'm not like if he had a huge fumbling issue and then he measured it, it's like, well,
Yeah.
we got our answer.
It's
And he
all the
didn't.
confirmation thing,
That's
right?
all
It's
it
all that
is.
stuff.
That's what you're looking for. So I think is it overblown a little bit? Yes. Does it matter? Yes. Like both things can be true, but it's like like 2% as opposed to 90%.
So like the whole combine, is there anything here that a quarterback can do to either raise or lower their stock? Because I'm of the opinion that like if you're really moving a guy up based off of this, you're doing it right.
No, interview process though. Interview
Okay,
process
interviews.
is
On
huge.
field,
Yeah,
right.
and everyone's
Yeah.
coming out of the Malik Willis stuff
I mean,
saying
you
he's a legend.
Watch them throw, and we can even see right here in the TV, they're throwing slants and out routes and go balls. Like everyone has done that against air since they were in 8th grade, you know.
Same. I've
And,
done
and
that.
so that's
I didn't play
how.
quarterback.
Yeah, but it's but interviews is like that's the main thing. Getting on the board. And every team's different what they're going to ask them, but like that's going to help you so much. And just because a lot of the guys, they want to frazzle you and they want to like get you just rattled and like try. That's what I've learned. They try to poke and hey, this was a crappy play. What were you reading here? Like and then how they handle that. So like that, I think that's bigger than anything for quarterbacks.
Say you're an interviewer behind the scenes. What would you be asking, guy? What do you want to get to learn from these quarterbacks? You have all these top guys that you get to interview. What would you ask them to find out the most?
You just start, okay, what's some plays you like? Okay, all right, we draw them up. All right, and then all these guys are going to be coached up. Some will just know it anyways, but then you get them to actually like explain the play. Why do you like it? Not just go, oh, I like this play because I throw touchdowns on it. You know, actually explain it.
I like touchdowns.
Yeah, exactly. I had a big play against it. It was great. You know, I met a girl that night too. But protections is the huge thing too. That is the biggest transition for so many of these guys getting to the NFL level is also it's like handling that. So just seeing, okay, do you know it or do you like on this one particular play, have you been coached up by your agent and by your trainer for 6 weeks to like actually explain that play? So that's where you're just trying to dissect is how well they actually know the stuff.
So do you make anything of asking guys to shoot hoops, the mini hoop and all that stuff? I feel like you don't.
Not really. It's more, no. Maybe that's just me and I just don't give a shit about that. But it's like, I think more for that, it's like, you're just gauging their reaction, like how they go about it.
So protection stuff. I know Sam Howell, like what he did at North Carolina was, I know that one of the coaches he was worked with said that like when he had a slot blitz, it was him. Like there were like certain blitzes that if he faced, there was no protection adjustments he could make. That was just, it was on him. It was for him to do. How easy is that stuff to learn once you get to the NFL? Like what, like if you haven't done it at all, which like Sam Howell really hasn't done much to this point, how easy is that stuff to pick up when you get to the NFL offense?
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's very hard, and some offenses will go in and go, hey, we're not putting anything on the quarterback. Like, hey, well, but you have to have a center in place that can handle all that. And that's what we saw like with Justin Fields with the Bears. And I actually thought he was okay with it, but then the center would just leave him out to dry because he was not adjusting anything whatsoever. And you could see that's where the problem's like, because then the quarterback's not going, hey, we're actually doing this, we're pointing this. Like, that's the transition. I think some of these guys are so sharp they can pick it up. Like a guy like Trevor Lawrence, he didn't really have to handle it, but then he showed flashes in that simple Clemson offense that he would just kind of like tell ETN and just be, hey, look out over there. And it's like, okay, you can handle it. It's hard though because you need being on the board. This is the difference between like me and even like a Brady Quinn is that like, yes, I'm on the board, I can do it great. Bullets are flying though. Am I worried about just getting the snap or am I actually going like, oh, that doesn't look right. Like, hey, wait, what's wrong with this? Let's rip this. So it just takes reps. But some guys pick it up so quick, and then some guys are just on that board. Oh yeah, that's great. And as soon as the bullets start flying, they just shit the bed. Wow. It's hard. It really is hard.
So how do you currently see this quarterback class? Who are some of your top guys? I know you've talked a lot about this half-round adjustment you make for quarterbacks and trying to move guys up because you really like them. How do you see them right now? And when's the first spot where it starts to make sense to take your first guy off the board?
None of them till the 20s. And I know that won't happen in real life. But yeah, as much as even I like Renner, I came on your guys' show and talked about him. Still, that's where he ran well, but if you watch him, it's like, yeah, that's what he runs. He pulls away from guys. But like a guy like, I have come around on Willis a little bit on Malik. It is just that I get the home run swing aspect of him. And if you're betting on a quarterback, isn't that what we all talk about? Is you have to get an elite guy. You have to get a guy that can carry you to the promised land. And he has that 5%, 10% chance of doing that, even if he has a lot to work on. So it's one of those where I've had to kind of like come to grips and go, I'm like, okay, I get the love for him, even if my grade hasn't really changed much. It's like I get the home run swing.
What are your thoughts on like redshirting a quarterback once you get to the NFL in terms of like when do you start them? Do you learn more on the football field, or do some guys improve more just by being in that offense, getting the reps in practice, but not necessarily being thrown to the wolves and having that pressure on them?
I think you got to play. I've come around. I used to be a guy that's like, oh yeah, I can sit, but I've realized now it's like the coaches now are better at not being the true West Coast with 40 words in the lexicon and all this stuff in each play, and like making it simpler for these guys. So I think it's easier to transition. I mean, even just like simple things like RPOs and nakeds and bootlegs and stuff like that. That's what helps them. So I think it's bullets. Like you have to face live bullets. Like you just have. I've talked about with like Trey Lance. I think he needs reps. Like these types of guys, they just need those reps because it's different from going to practice when, oh yeah, no one can touch me, and I can just hang out in the pocket and move around, to actually going like, hey, I have to get the ball out in 2.5 seconds. Like I think reps, as many as possible.
Let's pivot to this wide receiver class. Drake London not testing. I know he's a lot of people's big wide receiver one, but there still have been a lot of impressive times. More impressive when we saw the unofficial times, and those things slowed down quite a bit. I know you're a big proponent of Chris Olave over Garrett Wilson. I think more of that discussion will go as we move forward. Garrett Wilson runs like a tick faster. It's a weird situation because Chris Olave probably runs the second time if he knows he ran a 4.39. Anyway, compare those two receivers and where you're at with them.
Yep, I think Olave, and I've tweeted this, is just that he's scheme proof. I think worse you're getting a number 2, like which is when you're taking a guy in the first round. That's why taking a receiver in the first and they don't work out for you, it can be devastating.
Yeah.
Because you're giving them reps and targets and like plays, like they're tangible plays, and you kind of have to play him like a Jalen Reagor. It's like, we have to play this guy. We just took him in the 20s, like, But I think that's why I like Olave so much. It's like I can picture him in any type of offense. It's not where I'm like, yeah, well, they need a vertical guy. It's like, no, whatever you're going to ask him to do, he's going to do it very well. He's very polished, and that's why it was cool to see him run like that. It's like, yeah, when you run that fast and you're able to, when you run a route, most routes you're running at 90% of your top speed because you have to throttle down and all that. So when you have that top end speed, okay, then your 90% is going to be even faster, faster than a normal guy. So that's why I like him. I just think he's a complete player and still has upside to be a true number 1 target monster. But I think that his floor is so high as well. And then with Wilson, I think he's more of a project than people have given him credit for. Beating press, even route running, he has the flashes. Like that's the thing, it's flashes of him. And so like I say he could be an Ayuk type where it's like you get him to the right spot where you keep it simple for him. Let him work on the polish, the technique, and then that can be like his upside there. But with him is he lunges into his routes a little bit, which is kind of awkward sometimes. Press kind of gives him his issues. The Penn State game always stands out to me. But saying all that is, if he does work on the technique and stuff, it's like, have you seen this guy with the ball in his hands?
Yeah.
It's like, yes, so that's the appeal of him. It's one of those guys I would never reach on, but if you take him like in the 20s, it's like, okay, I get it because the flashes are there.
Hearing you talk about Olave, we had you on the show before last year's class, and I know they're not the same player, but I mean, it's a lot of how you talked about Rashad Bateman.
Yes.
When you talked about Rashad Bateman, it was like, oh, maybe he's not this high, maybe he's not this high end, maybe he's not whatever, but like scheme proof, and I know what I'm getting, and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And I do think that after talking to you and other people about Olave, you find yourself like taking to that a lot more about guys that you could bring in and ask to do everything right away, and that obviously has a ton of value. Where other people are obviously trying to hit these home runs with the receivers, it can be more difficult. And if you have to add this extra layer of scheme, add this extra layer to get him targets, it just makes that much harder. Because how many players in your offense can you have like that?
Exactly.
You can't have 2 or 3 guys you have to scheme targets to have for success. You need guys that get open as a second and third read on routes and all that.
I've always, the designery plays is a lot of these guys, yes, if they, we call them gadget guys sometimes, but it's like, yes, if the coach is going like, hey, this is a Garrett Wilson play and blah, 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 we have to do all this, like, that's exhausting to do that like for 12 different plays. Just
and it's also you're really dependent on him being like electric.
And making the most of
exactly.
every one
He has to
of these
get Deebo
targets.
Samuel to be nearly as efficient as you need to be if you're going to have that high percentage of routes going to him or high percentage of targets.
And a phrase I've kind of come to use is like, just like with Bateman, that's such a great example too, because that's why I liked him. It's like, I can just see this guy in any offense and he's going to contribute, is in the flow of the play. Is like, it's truly when the quarterback's going 1 to 2 to 3, he's getting open whether he is 1, 2, or 3. And those are the guys that are useful. So it's not when the guy's like, okay, we have a little, like you play Madden and stuff, when it's like, okay, well, I want to get the one guy's ball in his hands and they have the whole like formation and stuff like that. When I can just call my white cross play, my 99, like whatever I want to call, and it's like, okay, he's one of the options and he's going to get open. Okay, we can trust that. We don't have to just go, oh, well, that's not his best route. That's not his best concept. He's not good on digs. Like, that's why the Olaves of the world, it's like, oh, yeah, no matter what you put him on, he's going to be useful.
That's great.
So last time you were on, you talked about, to give a guy a top 10 grade, I believe, he has to have size. You talked about how much covered size the position, but this was, I believe, I read, it was the lightest wide receiver class ever at the Combine. And you have guys like Chris Olave, 187 pounds, Garrett Wilson, 183, John Dotson, 178. Are you coming around maybe a little bit on smaller wide receivers? Are they growing on you maybe a little bit? That's where the game's going?
They are. Waddle was very big for me to go like, okay, and again, he has world-class speed, so it's, but those guys, it's like, okay, with the rule changes, with no more headhunters over the middle, no coaches willing to not just say RPOs, but just run a variety of concepts. Now everybody's just kind of running everything now in the NFL. That these guys are more useful. It's these guys, they have to win on the outside. Being a slot only guy, it's a detriment because what if injuries happen? And all of a sudden it's like, well, there's our first round pick, and guess what? We can't line him up on the outside because Press is going to kick his ass. But I think I am coming around on it because they just have to have those traits that's like they can win elsewhere. Because like that's why I love Dotson. He's a great route runner. He can beat press. He's great range, catching range, and all that.
Despite being a smaller dude.
Being 180, soaking wet. And so like those guys, they have to bring something. It's as opposed to being like a one-trick pony at 175 and going like, yeah, he's great deep. All right, what else can he do? You know, or he's great from the slot. Okay, well that's a guy in the second round. So long story short, it's like, yes, I'm coming around for it, but they still have to have that receiver to them, like actual receiver stuff.
I think I like what you said there about the headhunters, because I think that to me is more why you're seeing smaller wide receivers than the lack of illegal contact. Everyone brings illegal contact, whatever, but I think the passing game, the fact that safeties can't come downhill with violence and like really hit dudes, because it used to be like alligator arms used to get talked about a lot all the time. Used to be talked about, oh, he doesn't have the size to go over the middle. It's like now that's not even a thing. Like that is not even a thing.
I think another piece of it too, though, is like we're putting more pass catchers on the field, right? And now you're running more 3 wide, more 4 wide. You can't just have like everyone's 200 plus pounds all running the same. Like people talk so much about the necessity in having like complementary skill sets in your receiving core, right? You want guys that can do different things, and if they're all 6'2", 205, they're not going to all be able to do these different things that you're looking for in an offense.
The way I've looked at it, I stole from Kyle Shanahan, is that he said, I like my receiver room to look like a basketball line. They have every position, you know, point guard, shooting guard, all that, center. And I always love looking at it that way.
Keeps your playbook more diverse. It keeps you more multiple. I think that's a really good point. Let's finish with Skye Moore. Skye Moore is my Skye, top 40 guy on PFF draft board. And you, in the past, have not liked these smaller types. He's a small school guy. Your review of Moore, guy came in with like over 31-inch arms, over 10-inch hands. Yeah, he's only 5'10", maybe a little bit lighter than you want, but those are some measurements too that matter.
And actually, he plays like. He weighed okay. Like he was, you know, he's 5'10", but he's built solidly. I love his tape. Like he is such a good player. That's like the only way to describe him. He's great on releases, and it's like, yes, the competition's whatever, but no one gets their hands on him. Like, and we've seen clips of it, winning with quickness and stuff. How I put it is that I think he's going to be high end 2, and what's awesome about him is every target you give him, he's going to make the most of, because he's such a good route runner. You see the 10-inch hands come into play because he just grabs the ball, and they showed the slow-mo clips when they're running the gauntlet drill, and you can see him just grasping the ball. So it's, is he 5'10" and change? Yeah, but he has big hands and he plays big, and that's what matters. How many times you see him in the end zone, like catching like a fade, like coming down and contested catch? He's just a complete kind of receiver. I think one thing that's like a little curious for me is some of his yard creation after the catch a little bit. I think he's a splitter as opposed to like a juker, even though he has quickness. So I want to watch a little bit more of that. But I really like him. I have I think a late second round grade on him. I feel pretty comfortable about that. Like someone took him earlier in that. I get it.
I guess one last thing. How do you deal with level of competition, especially for wide receivers, when that cornerback, like you get an athletic difference, you get like even coverages that they're facing difference? How do you deal with that, especially for guys like Skye Moore, Khalil Shakir, like these small school guys who maybe didn't face anyone worth a damn?
Yeah, it's true. They have to dominate. And that's number one. It's not like, oh yeah, he has some traits and he caught 700 yards. You know, it's like, no, I want, and that's what Skye Moore and Khalil Shakir did. They dominated those competitions. So that's what I look at. Okay, when they do face the big school guys, and luckily Western Michigan did, and Boise plays a couple as well. I love Shakir, by the way. Like he's another guy. Really love Shakir, but it's those guys. It's okay in those big school games. Were they given issues, or are they just still consistently doing what they did small schools? Which is the obvious answer. But that's really what you're looking at. But honestly, when I look at a small school guy, it better be 90% of those reps you are
untouchable.
You're untouchable. You better look like the best player on the field. That's what it looks like. It's not where it's like, which guy am I looking at again? Like which is it? This guy at the top? Like, okay, that doesn't really flash. But this guy should, every time you watch, it's like watching high school and you go, all right, which guy's the D1 guy? Like, you know, like then you just go, okay, this guy right here. That's kind of the test I always look for.
Nate, this has been fantastic. Always appreciate having you on the show. Thanks again.
Thank you. I'm used to being QB2, so this is perfect.
Now joining the show is Cynthia Frelund, analytics genius, expert. We've been throwing a handful of titles around, but I'm excited to have you on the show.
Just go say it fast. Analytics analyst. Do it at home.
Analytics analyst.
Just have fun with that.
That's tough. That's
just
tough.
Keep
Well,
going, do it
I know
5
Mike
times fast.
really wanted to get you on to talk a lot about how you're seeing teams use analytics, and I think that's a common question, really, to get more in depth with it. Specifically player evaluation, right? Because everyone during the season talks about leveraging analytics on 4th downs and making a decision to kick or not to kick and the overtime rules and all that stuff, but I don't think a lot gets discussed with player evaluation and how arm length, hand size, and all these new data points, right, get leveraged in player evaluation. How are you seeing teams use that more? And I guess speak specifically onto, what are the more valuable data points they pick up here?
I think, like, to the first question, I think teams are creating frameworks of kind of what's in range and what's out of range to verify or dispute what they've seen on film. So they grind all the film, they send their scouts out, their scouts give their analysis, their reports, and then they just want to sort of all get on the same page. So they create a framework, and it used to just be the measurables we have from the combine, and now it's measurables that are tools like what PFF provides. So it's really interesting to see with all the different ways. And then most teams have GPS, like one or another GPS provider, so they can now get on-field speeds for their college players, which we didn't used to be able to do. So more technology means more data points, means more frameworks. So the better teams are creating more specific frameworks. We want this type of linebacker. That's one that's interesting because a lot of teams have different philosophies on linebackers. We want a coverage linebacker. We want Micah Parsons is so interesting because what is he?
We all want Micah Parsons. We want a Micah Parsons linebacker.
Exactly, but it's like, do you want more of a coverage guy? Do you want more the traditional linebacker, or what kind of receiver do you want? Now you're seeing receivers being used as Deebo Samuel or Cooper Kupp in just such different ways, and they don't fit traditional molds. So they're using more data points to create, like, this is kind of what we're looking for.
Wow.
And if he falls within these ranges, then it's backing up what we see on tape.
Kind of a follow-up to that, I was talking a little bit, Mike, I'm a big fan of the interview process, talking to players, and I know we were talking to Brady Quinn recently. He says more teams cross off players during this week off their board for the interview process and stuff that shows up there. How much is analytics creeping into that, right? Are people saying this guy on a scale of 1 to 10 has this personality or whatever, and you're looking more at that data? Because I do think if you keep going anecdotal with this interview process, you're going to miss on things. A guy will rub you in the wrong way and you're taking them off boards. If you're actually doing a more data-driven approach with how you talk to these guys, how they react to missing on the mini hoop and stuff like that, and actually measuring it, I do think the analytics could be good. Do you know if teams are doing that?
There are at least, I want to say 5. It could be 6. Less than 10, more than 2. How about that? About at least 5 teams that they have like a rubric, like a grading rubric that has some numbers on it.
Yeah.
And they'll ask certain questions in a certain order, and they've vetted it with like a sports psychologist or a behavioral scientist of some sort, and they kind of, and then they'll rate like, what was your response? And there are qualitative answers, so they'll rate it like, I liked it 5, you liked it 4, and et cetera, and then they'll blend those qualitative into a more quantitative process, but they've created the structure using best practices from like actual psychologists and people who know about how your brain works and how you respond to all these. This is kind of like this is a really difficult scenario to be interviewed in because they're tired. It's confusing. It's a lot of just, can you follow this direction? And and you're hearing all these things about yourself, and you're being analyzed. Like, so it's they try to be mindful of the psychology of it.
That makes a ton of sense. Honestly, I think we need to get our hands on one of those.
Yeah, you brought the GPS tracking stuff, which to me seems like the next frontier in football analytics. Like, that is going to be player data tracking. Is going to be like 10 years from now, 20 years from now. I'm not sure the combine is even going to matter. How much are teams putting that emphasis on that over the 4.3s we see here and the speed we actually see when they're not wearing pads?
Wait,
what
like
they're
the
wearing
4.3
pads.
or like the actual numbers?
The 4.1s.
Oh, wait a minute. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Look, I think it's just like anything else. It's like when we went to college, we had to take the SAT and we had to write an essay and we had to do all these different. I don't even know if kids do that anymore. I haven't like applied to college recently, but
they took away the essay part now.
Right.
Yeah.
So now like but we all had to follow a format, and the tradition of football is such that they want to. Did you go through the process? It's a rite of passage. Did you get it?
It's the principle.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what goes on here is really like, I think the new like analysis I'm going to do is I'm going to walk around to the hotels and I'm going to see which agent is talking to which other agent, right? And who or which teams, because then you could learn more about free agency here than I really do about the draft, which shapes the draft, because then whichever free agents go somewhere will dictate the what a team needs. So it's interesting. Like the other stuff that happens here is so important that like the ceremony of just running is, or working out is, it just kind of. It's a rite of passage. Did you do your, get off my lawn, that kind of thing.
So the Rams are big on using that tracking data, and they didn't even send like their staff here. Is that going to be, obviously it's copycat league, you always say, are people going to start to follow that model where they don't put their scouts on the road as much as other teams, where they start to do all in-house stuff and basically don't have their people doing the traditional scouting methods?
Well, let me be honest. When's the last time who was the president the last time the Rams picked in the first round?
That's also fair. That's also fair.
They don't need to get that right. I was having some really interesting conversations. I'd be really curious to hear all of your thoughts on this, like the value of hitting on an elite player in the draft, because homegrown, in your system, you kind of know what to pay them, you've had the relationship with the agent, you have the relationship with the player, you know the system, all these things. Like hitting on an Aaron Donald, what's the value of that? It's like very massively valuable. So I think some of it's a little bit of chicken and a little bit of egg. I would imagine if they were picking in the first round, you would see more Rams representation here. And I do think that some of those like smaller school guys, that they're actually pretty good at figuring out if their system fits. I think they do a pretty, I'm going to call it a traditional study, but kind of using an untraditional way of procuring the data. So I think you're going to see more head coaches not be here as a way to empower the the coaches who are kind of up and coming coaches, because I don't necessarily think Kyle Shanahan needs to be here. If you've already have your quarterback, if you already have, maybe you don't need those interviews. And maybe you empower your OC to gather that data. So, because do you really want to waste your time interviewing people who you don't want? I don't know. Like it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. I'd rather go on vacation. Just kidding. I actually love it here, but
Focusing on the number 1 overall pick, there's a lot of speculation that the Jaguars are deciding between Ike Ekwonu, the NC State offensive tackle, and Evan Neal of Alabama, a guy that came in at 337 but looked like he was 205 or whatever it was. Ike Ekwonu testing right now.
No, his waist, it looks like a wide receiver waist.
It's absurd.
It was, I'm like, is this a human? Like, are we the same species? Like, how does this happen? Like, I'm like, whoa, crazy. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
What I was saying,
everyone must know his tiny waist. It's crazy.
Evan Neal, some people are billing him as like the safer of the two options, right? They feel he can immediately come in and have the success. Coming from Alabama, he's got inside-outside versatility, whereas Ike Ekwonu is getting billed as this upside. And Mike and I joke on this podcast about upside, and can you value that? Can you measure how much of the percentage chance he becomes a star versus the percentage chance he becomes a starter or a bench player? How much our teams are measuring that, right? How much are our teams thinking about, okay, I want an 8% boom potential versus like a 40% starter potential? I do think that's the huge factor. Like the value of that, like hitting on a high-end player versus the value of safety and comfort.
I think the other thing that you need to factor into that is, on some level, the value of getting a left tackle in the left tackle market that's very expensive on a rookie contract for an extra year.
Yeah.
I do think that does have a value. Like that's part of why the whole running backs don't matter thing is like, well, the running back market is okay. There's some few outliers, but you can get running backs that are fairly priced. You cannot find me a left tackle that is really good that's not super expensive. So part of that has value to it too. And I think of all of the positions, I think anyone on the O-line that is as old school as they come, right? They wouldn't even, you go up to an O-line coach and be like, his complete like boom potential is 8%. They'd be like, what does that even mean?
Yeah,
right?
so true.
But it, whereas a wide receiver, especially in this class, like everyone's like, which flavor of wide receiver do you want? So this is like a boom, like that would make sense to them, but it just feel like that's when it's like old school, grit. Like I think that's kind of more, at least what my experience is.
And also I think, I have no data to back this up, but just
exciting
from what I've
yes, what you've taken in.
Offensive tackles are more loyal to the franchises. Like they're more likely to sign an extension prior to free agency. Like that's why the big ones don't often hit free agency.
Right.
So that's why it's also rare to pay.
I do think you're hitting the nail on the head though with like the positional value conversation. I do think it's like some negative criticism by traditional draft analysts or people who are like, oh man, you're telling me positional value means I can't draft Kyle Hamilton in the first round. But where positional value starts for me and where the conversation starts for me is how much do these positions make on their second contract? Because getting a left tackle or pass rusher at the two highest paid non-quarterback positions in the NFL on rookie contracts with that fifth-year option is so much more valuable than nailing an off-ball linebacker or nailing a safety, because you can get really good safeties or really good centers, right? The highest paid center in the NFL doesn't make as much as the 20th ranked left tackle. You can go get those guys on the open market. I really do. That's where the conversation starts.
Although I know one person amongst us likes Notre Dame more than the rest.
Yes.
And I do know that in certain cases, I think the value of safety is actually going up.
Okay.
Especially a safety with versatility. And I think that Kyle Hamilton specifically, these guys who can be super multiple, especially now you see the league, it's just chess matches. So you see a bunch of quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow come to mind immediately. Look at the difference between when they face single high safeties, which is typically man coverage, or when they face two safety shells, which is often zone. And then you see that's kind of the kryptonite right there, right? We know the blitz stuff, but also the two safety, that situation becomes more and more valuable. Now, so depending on the franchise, if I'm, facing these, if I'm in the AFC, that actually drives the value of a guy like Kyle Hamilton up because he has such versatility and he can be that Patrick Mahomes stopper, So I think that one's rising because of what we've seen from tight ends and how wide receivers are being used, and the fact that we're passing all of the time instead of running the ball. So I think that I do think that that one's going up just in general. But I'm with you on the off-ball.
It has to
I
go
just
up,
said that.
right?
I said that in last 2 pods ago. I was safety's going up because of the way the defenses are playing.
You think you're better than us? I get
I'm
that.
just saying.
I get that. No,
we're
it's
in
fine.
agreement.
I said it 2 years ago.
ago.
Cynthia, this has been fantastic. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's going to do it for this episode of Tailgate. Make sure you rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Until next time, Mike Renner, Gayle, Tailgate.